Welcome everybody, it's Selman. In this video we are going to be talking about our very first storyline information for Call of Duty World War II Zombies, and it's pretty darn crazy to be getting storyline information this early, but we are. So where I actually got this information from is actually from a couple different places. One was from MrRoflWaffles because he was actually sent one of these letters, and the other one is actually from the viral campaign that they're doing where you go to their website and punch in different codes and different things pop up, and that one would lead you to a journal. And what I'm going to be doing this video is actually getting those two and just breaking them down just to the important parts. And I'm not going to be reading the full things, I'm just going to be talking about the important parts of these. And I am going to be linking down all the people who helped me do this, whether it be a source from MrRoflWaffles video or somewhere from Reddit or something like that. I will be linking them all down in the description, so if you guys want to check out any of that, they will be down there. But anyways, without further delays, actually get into this video. So we're first going to start off with the letter, then after that we'll go on to the journal. But first things first, we're going to go with the letter. Even before that, I want to look at the outside of the letter even before going and looking at the context of the letter, because on the outside of the letter we actually see a couple things that are pretty interesting. First thing we see is that it's actually made out by Physicist, or I'm not entirely sure if that's how you say his name, but we do know it's Claus something, Physicist or something like that. Another thing you would notice is that it's cleared by the OSS, or at least it says that. After that, when you actually open the letter, we can actually see it's made out on March 20th, 1941, and made out to somebody called Marie. Now in this letter we actually learn a lot about Claus and Marie, but first we learn about Marie and that she's living in England and that she's studying at Cambridge. But on the other hand, Claus was staying at Heidelberg but had to leave his study to take care of their father, which of course we learned they are siblings at this point. But coming back to Claus, we actually learned that Claus is pretty darn frustrated that he had to leave his studies to take care of their father, and he got even worse because his mentor Professor Linden retired, and he thought there was no way he could ever play a role in Germany's scientific renaissance. But then he says something, I want to read this just word for word because it's just so cool. But he says, "But fate is a funny thing. If I had stayed in Heidelberg, I would have missed the greatest discovery in our time, right underneath our noses. Marie, I wept when they found it. When the workers came out from the mine talking about what they have found, this artifact of legend, my life had meaning again. My life had purpose." And that is just so cool. But a couple things to note from that is that we do hear it's right underneath their noses, and if you remember where he was taking care of their father, so wherever his father was is where it was, and we'll actually learn the exact location of where this is in just a couple seconds, but for now just keep that in mind. Another thing he says is that it's an artifact of legend, and of course right after this we will learn what this artifact of legend is again. And again, I just want to read this word for word again because he says something pretty interesting. "I had to get this message to wherever it mattered. To the German Reich. My contacts at the university put me in touch with the Führer, Heinz F. Richter." And this is interesting. I gotta pause right here because this is so weird, because we do hear the Führer, but he's not Hitler, because if you remember, Hitler was a Führer. I'm pretty sure Führer means leader, and for there to be multiple Führers doesn't make sense. I'm pretty sure there was nobody called except Hitler being called the Führer at the time of the Nazis' reign, which is weird because I think what they're doing here is actually getting rid of Hitler and going to be swapping him out with some other fictional character. I'm pretty sure Heinz F. Richter is not an actual guy. I've looked him up and I can't find anything. So I think they're just going to throw out Hitler and bring some other guy in, because it'd be kind of weird fighting against Hitler. It just doesn't feel as fun, at least I don't think it would, but that's just something I wanted to stop and note. But he says a couple other things, but the main thing I want to talk about is that he says that the artifact of legend was actually the Barbossa's sword. And this is pretty interesting because Barbossa's sword and Barbossa himself have a pretty interesting legend behind him. And what makes it even more interesting, because we actually knew about Barbossa for a couple months now, because we had some other teasers, and one was Frederick Barbossa. And there's a legend behind all this stuff. It says, the legend says he is not dead, but asleep with his knights in a cave in a place called Barbary, Germany. I'm not too sure if I said that first word right, but this is very interesting because it actually gives us the location of where this is located. But just to continue reading this last part, "And when the ravens cease to fly around the mountains, he will awake and restore Germany to its ancient greatness." Now, that's pretty much it. But one thing he says, Bavaria, or at least I think it said like that, this is actually where Claus was actually at, because of something we'll see inside Maria's journal in just a bit. But we do know that this is the location of that I think is where they were originally born, which of course was in Germany. And that's about it for the letter, but there's much more in the journal, and this journal is just so interesting. It has so much more than this letter. But anyways, the journal actually takes place 2 years later, because the letter was actually written on March 20th, 1941. This part of the journal is being written on June 22nd, 1943. So like I said, a 2-year difference. Now, a couple things to note is that Maria is no longer in England, but she's actually in America, in Prince William's country, which is in Virginia, I believe. Now, for this one, I kind of just want to read the important part and then explain why it's important. I think that'd be easier with her journal, because the letter was easier just to talk about instead of actually reading it for the most part, but this one is, you have to read the context to understand why it's important. So she says, the messages from Claus have grown more desperate, and I hesitate to write this, but they began to border on madness. Now, this is interesting because it sounds like Claus is still sending her letters, but they're actually starting to sound pretty crazy at this point. I'm not entirely sure what exactly it's about. Maybe it's because of his studies, or maybe he's actually just going crazy because maybe they have their version of the 115 delusions. Maybe they're going in with something like that. I'm not entirely sure, but I just thought it was worth mentioning. The next one, of course, I'll read, and then of course I'll explain why right after, but it says, my contacts of the UK recommend that I get in touch with a military architect who is spearheading a new organization that may be useful. He called the Monuments, Fine Arts, and Achievements Program, rolling his eyes at the clunky, no-nonsense American name, but he said they could be my best shot for getting behind enemy lines. This group will be focused on recovering and safeguarding historical and cultural monuments, items that the Nazis have stolen from the most valued collections in Europe. Now, this is actually pretty interesting because this actually all happened, and this could relate to our other teaser we got for Zombies, having the painting of Raphael, which is something that was actually in real life stolen by the Nazis and to this day has still not been found. And this is probably how she's going to get behind the enemy lines, which I'll come back to this later because I'm just going to get too hyped and off track if I go talk about it now. But anyways, this become important later. Next part I want to read is where she says, while I could care less about dusty artifacts Claus has claimed to uncovered for the Nazis, they may provide an angle I need to get an operation moving in Mittelberg into my hometown. After my exodus in Bavaria 10 years ago, I never thought I would return. I saw the beer hall pooch for what it was, the first winds of a coming storm. Claus was more optimistic. He drew hope from these fiery words of the Kampffield. I don't know what that is, but both of these are actually relating to especially the beer hall pooch, because this thing actually was when Hitler went and tried to take over Germany originally, but ended up failing, just got thrown in prison, all that good stuff. But that's what that is. She's just talking about how this all happened when she was actually there and all that good stuff. And funnily enough, this also took place in Bavaria, which again, it just keeps coming back to this place, and I just find it pretty darn fascinating. And then after this, she says, I was worried about my brother. He had a brilliant mind, top of his class at Heidelberg, mentored by one of the greatest physicists of our time, and one of the most ambitious new voices leading the Deutsches something. I can't say this guy's name, but another thing she notes real quick is that she says, our last fight was about father's death. Now, we actually learned that their father died. Of course, he was alive during the letter because he was taking care of his father at the time, and that's what he was doing back in their hometown and all that good stuff. But it looks like he died, and that may come into importance later on, but I'm not entirely sure. And the last thing I want to read from what she says, now I feared my years of training with the OSS must come to service for this one singular cause, to rescue my brother. Now, this is so interesting because she's a part of the OSS, and that's pretty darn interesting on its own. And first things first, if you guys don't know what the OSS was, it was kind of pretty much just the CIA of the past. It's just the World War II's version of the CIA that the United States have, and nothing really worth going any deeper than that right now. But she's actually a part of the OSS, which, like I said, is pretty darn interesting. But I think this is actually setting up the premise for our storyline and where we're going to be going with our characters and everything. Because not only that, we also got an image that we're thinking is for our first map that I'll probably have on screen right now, but what I think is going to be happening here is that she's going to go join forces with these Americans. Of course, I'm pretty sure she's German because she grew up with her brother, and her brother's German, and they grew up in Bavaria. I can't say that word for the life of me, and of course I do apologize for me butchering every single German word I said. But anyways, back to what I was talking about. What I'm thinking is what this is just a premise for our storyline, just setting absolutely everything up, and that she's going to be going with this group called the Monuments, Fine Arts, and Achievements Program. She's going to go with other American people. Somehow some of these bad's going to happen while they're behind enemy lines, and then at that point she's going to go start looking for her brother. Now, she's probably going to be there with 3 other Americans from this organization. Also, that's what I'm thinking, at least, unless she meets up with her brother right away. Then we're working with 2 Germans and 2 Americans, which would be really interesting. It just gets me so hyped for this mode. Besides that, all I could really say, just speculation. It'd be just so cool if we're fighting with siblings. It'd be cool, just think about that, because our characters have never really had any relations in Zombies. There were just 4 characters who two happened to be together. It was just all coincidental pretty much for the most part. Well, kind of coincidental, but it was just really that they had no real connections between each other prior to this. But to see that some would be previously in the same organization together and then the other two be siblings, it would just be so cool. And then the connection between one of the siblings and the other two people, of course being new to the organization but still being part of the organization they were a part of, it would just seem so cool. And I'm just so hyped for this. Hopefully that's what they're going to do. We might just get Murray and the 3 other Americans, or the 3 other people a part of this organization. I guess they really don't have to be Americans, but it sounds like it's an American organization. But I don't know, tell me what you guys think about this. Hopefully this video wasn't too long. It's been taking me a while to record, but anyways, if you guys did enjoy the video and you guys are hyped for this, go ahead and tell me down in the comments. But if you guys want to stay tuned for content similar to this, go ahead and subscribe. But I'm going to go, and I will catch you guys on my next video.